All right, good morning and welcome to AM Express right here on Africa Business Radio, where we look into and analyze developing stories and headlines from Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. And joining us for conversations this morning is Mr. Philip Isakwa, the publisher Business AM. Good morning, Mr. Philip.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us once again. It's been an interesting week so far. I mean, one of your major headlines this week had investors watching for surprises in the MPC meeting. Of course, we saw them make that decision. We saw a reduction in the MPR by 100 basis points from 12.5 to 11.5%. They adjusted the asymmetric corridor from positive 200 to a negative 500 basis point to a positive 100 to a negative 700 basis points around the MPR. They also retained the CRR at 27.5%, and the liquidity ratio was also retained at 30%. Did that expansionary move come as a surprise to you?
Well, yes and no. Yes, because we had spoken to analysts last week with regards to the report we put out on Monday. And they were looking at the Monetary Policy Committee retaining as it has done in the last many meetings. Right. And if you look at what other central banks, the CBN committee had always been expected to do something, and because it did not do anything over several meetings, I mean, people then thought, well, you can only expect surprises if anything was done. Right. Because across the world, many central banks, whether in the UK, in South Africa, the Feds in the US, have used what we call this monetary easing, policy easing instruments to try to intervene in the wake of COVID-19. But here we have waited, and when the indices across, whether you're looking at inflation, whether you're looking at GDP numbers, had suggested that the CBN would make a move, we did not see anything. So our analysts and investors who we spoke to did make a great call by saying it will be a surprise, So when they came up with reducing it by 100 basis points on Tuesday, it meant that the call was actually right, So it was a surprise, for the market. Now, how that goes on to deal with the challenges that the economy faces, will now be what to look out for in the next couple of months or so.
All right, now let's move away from that story. Now, among the CBN Economic Sustainability Plan is the Solar Connection Facility, where the country targets a 7 billion naira increase in tax revenues annually and $10 million in annual import substitution. Of course, I'm picking this up from page 26, which gives a breakdown of what that particular facility of the CBN will see. But then, what will be the objective of this initiative by the federal government?
Again, government came up with the sustainability plan, in response to COVID-19, and then the global downturn, the downturn in the global economy. Now, there are different departments or compartments, for which intervention was going to be made by the federal government. And CBN, over time, the thing is that CBN can create money. You understand? Right. So what the CBN is doing, given the war chest that it has, is to see that it creates enough liquidity or enough funding instruments that can intervene in different sectors. Now, this is one of which is that the access to electricity is a major challenge in the country, not just in cities and towns, but you're looking at rural electrification, which is a major challenge. Now, one of the biggest challenges you have is connection to the grid. Now, the grid system that we operate means that it is difficult, to really get down to, let's say, the nook and crannies of the country, particularly the rural areas. So as part of this intervention, the CBN is saying that we want to make money available, for people who will intervene in the off-grid system, which means bringing electricity down to rural areas in such a way that rural communities will be able to access electricity. They are making funds available to companies, whether manufacturers or those who are involved in in that off-grid channel. And off-grid in this will mean through solar electricity supply. Solar will mean the solar people who produce solar panels. They will make funds available to these people, again, in concessionary loan terms. You have interest ranging from as low as 9%. I think the highest will be 10%. And they will give to these people over a period of some 10 years, some 5 years, but and then some have a moratorium of 2 years. So make money available to these people to be able to ramp up off-grid solar energy production, and then make this available to the different rural communities that we have in the country. So it's a part of the intervention. They've intervened in agriculture, they've intervened in pharmaceutical, they've intervened in other aspects of the general economy. So this is one area they're making direct intervention to ramp up off-grid solar energy power production, to reach rural areas.
Interesting. Now, details of that story is on page 26 of Business AM. Meanwhile, you can also find the NNPC trading numbers for July on that same page. All right, now it's the end of the week. What major stories should readers keep an eye on this coming week?
We're going to be looking at the capital market. Capital market in the sense that there is a recent report of aggregate activities in the market. We are going to examine in detail the MPC because you look at the outcome, in terms of how it affects the economy generally. Right. So we're going to be looking at that, to bring out the salient parts. We're going to be taking stories from energy sector. The group managing director of NMPC was talking about indigenous participants in the oil and gas industry, ramping up their capacity, to play globally. We want to examine what that really means and how prepared the participants the indigenous participants are, in terms of what the challenge that the NMPC is talking about.
All right, then we'll reach out to you again, Mr. Philip, for our Monday week starter edition of AM Express. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And
Philip Isakwa is the publisher, Business AM, Nigeria's fastest growing financial and business newspaper. The Breakfast Connect show continues after the break. Stay with us.